From the heartland of Europe, along both stretches of the Danube, lies Budapest, capital of Hungary. In its center stands the largest synagogue in Europe, the Dohany Street Synagogue. Built in 1859, it testifies to the important presence of Jews in this city. Ever since it was erected, successive generations have worshipped at the Dohany. Today, although a much smaller Jewish population resides in Budapest, the city nevertheless has seen Jews living here since antiquity, with their arrival as slaves to Roman legionnaires. Over the course of centuries, their descendants survive discrimination, expulsion, Ottoman invasions, and Christian persecution. In 1867, the Emperor Franz Joseph finally grants the Jews of Budapest their civil liberties and full citizenship. Now free to practice their religion, with access to higher education, business and commerce, and to centers of science, art, and government. And here, for the first time in their history, they feel assimilated and accepted.
Before the First World War, I think that was the peak, it was approximately 28–29% of the Budapest population was Jewish.
Ivan Fischer is a conductor, composer, and pianist. Born into a family of musicians, he is the third generation of Hungarian Jews who live in Budapest.
Huge population. And they had this feeling of self-confidence of this very large community.
The Budapest Jews are wealthy and an ever-growing population. The community decides to build a monument to celebrate their freedom of worship, which will affirm their presence for generations to come. With a length of 75 meters and a width of 27, it is, at the time of its construction, the largest synagogue in the world. The Dohany boasts seating for nearly 3,000 and for 2,000 standing congregants. It is a powerful and tangible symbol of Jewish emancipation in Europe.
Some sources mention 10,000 Jews at that period. Some sources mention 30,000 Jews, so there were many. And you know, 2 Jews, 3 political parties. This is how it works.
Rudolf Klein is a writer and professor of modern architecture, specializing in the history of synagogues in Central Europe, particularly those of Budapest.
The Dohany represents the elite. So these were the emancipated and reformed Jews. The Gentile society liked the Jews to be distinguishable, at least in terms of architectural language.
The Jewish community finds itself torn between the idea of integration and that of not wanting to offend their non-Jewish neighbors. They instruct Ludwig Forster, a well-known Viennese architect, to design and build a place of worship which would demonstrate a desire for integration while affirming their own religious identity.
The facade on the front was the statement, the Oriental statement. And the back facade for the Jewish community, it's much more modest. So it shows that the Jewish community had two faces. One was a face that they showed to the Gentiles, that the Gentiles were expecting to behave, the Jews, and the other was among us. And this intimate design was very far from any architectural statement. So the synagogue is a hybrid in terms of architectural language.
Forster adds two towers capped by Byzantine bulbs, an Eastern touch to differentiate it from a church. An architectural nod to the history of the Jews, a reminder that these were once thought to have adorned the Temple of Solomon.
And this Oriental style was the distinguishing element, and the basic idea was the Jews are the Orientals of Europe.
In accordance with the precepts of Judaism, the building is on an east-west axis. This architectural dictate explains why the final structure of the Dohany is not aligned with the street. Following disagreements, the architect Forster leaves the project once the exterior of the building is finished. He is replaced by the Hungarian architect Frigyes Fezel, who completes the space and designs the interior decor, frescoes, ceilings, and stained glass windows.
The space, which is practically a Christian church, longitudinal space, huge, which is very far from the Jewish tradition with the central space and intimacy. But this building is Jewish because it differs from the Gentile buildings in terms of its synagogue architecture.
Frigyes Fezel also creates and sculpts the monumental ark, which contains the Torah of holy writings given by God to Moses and his people on Mount Sinai. As in all synagogues, the ark faces Jerusalem.
The ark was traditionally a more modest element in synagogues, and with the emancipation, Jews wanted to bring closer the synagogue, not only space but also in details, to the churches, so they emphasized the ark more and more.
It is also Fezel who designs the star which houses the perpetual light, called Ner Tamid. This lamp, permanently lit in all the synagogues, evokes the flame which burned on the large candelabra in the Temple of Jerusalem. As in a church, the Dohany has not one but two pulpits, allowing rabbis with different points of view to have separate platforms to preach to their faithful. These sermons, often delivered in German, are used to communicate important messages to the community. At the time, many congregants speak only this language.
In the 19th century, as Jews became part of the Gentile society, at least in economic terms, they needed pulpits that described the political situation, what to do, anti-Semitism, how to fight it. So the service got secular elements and an architectural statement different from the ark and the bima.
Another particularity of the Dohany is its organ. It is one of the few synagogues in Europe to have one.
Well, this was the period when synagogues started acquiring organs. It was a difficult issue on Saturday because playing the organ is work. So usually the organists were Christian.
It is thought that great musicians might have played this instrument, amongst them Franz Liszt and Camille Saint-Saëns. The synagogue is not just a building of impressive proportions, it also symbolizes a community which wants to reform and rethink its religious practices.
I think it's part of my grandparents' or great-grandparents' tradition, which was an extremely reformed Judaism and an attempt to assimilate with the rest of the population. This was their dream. This was a huge dream. They wanted to be Hungarian, they wanted to be European, and they wanted to keep their Jewishness in a reduced way. And this building represents precisely this mixture. So that on the one hand, it's a Jewish home, on the other hand, it's an attempt to assimilate with the Christian population. And the building is a bit like a copy of a Christian cathedral. It's huge, it's big, it's resonant, it has this feel of a large church. And it has actually nothing to do with the basic idea of a synagogue, because a synagogue naturally should be a building where people gather, feel good, pray, and feel like actually a real small community. It doesn't have that intimate feel, it's grand.
It was a very proud generation, and they earned the emancipation in the end of the 19th century.
Zsuzsanna Toronyi is the director of the Jewish Museum in Budapest.
This was a very, very proud generation. They built up the whole city. They supported even the chain bridge, the Academy of Sciences, the whole vicinity of the synagogue, and the new quarters next to the parliament, and the most important buildings, and even the Andrássy Street, which was the main street of the city. And they wanted to show up that this is a very important, proud community. That's why they built up this beautiful building.
The Dohany Street Synagogue is part of a series of buildings, which includes a cemetery, a garden of remembrance, and the museum. Together, they form a collective center for the Jewish community of Budapest.
For me, it's much more than only a synagogue. It is a unique compound. This is a symbol. And this is a very unique combo of the religious identity and the cultural identity.
As early as the 19th century, this collection of buildings gathered around the synagogue becomes part of the Budapest cityscape. The Jewish Museum continues today to receive and archive testimonies arriving from throughout Hungary.
Every archive and every museums are institutions of memory. So for me, the archive is not in a past tense. So it is a continuously growing archive, and we are trying to keep every single memory crumbs from the past and from the present.
With the design plan approved and construction of the Dohany Street Synagogue about to begin, families who want to join the congregation are able to pre-order and prepay for seats for themselves and their families.
The synagogue was built up from donations. So the Jewish community tried to sell the future pews in the synagogue. So it was refinanced, the synagogue, and that's why they collected the names. They paid for the seat, and it is why we have a large amount of names.
The names of nearly 3,000 congregants and those of subsequent generations are inscribed on registers.
Adam Adler,
Daniel
Shalom Herz,
Adam Heller.
These names bear witness to the many thousands of worshipers who have attended and participated in the life of this synagogue.
Adam Rosner.
Sometimes it's very moving, but for first glance it is only names. Very common Hungarian Jewish names, mostly German. And then mapping the names on the original map of the synagogue, you will find out the networks, the original networks between the neighbors in the synagogue. You will find many women owners because they inherited the father's legacy. And we are still working on the collection of the names. So it's not only about the names, but memories of families.
At the Dohany, the seats on the first and second stories are reserved for women.
It is a rule that in, let's say, 95% of synagogues, men and women are separated. And men are usually on the ground floor and women are on the upper floor. And this was explained in different ways, that seeing a woman is distracting from the prayer.
These two floors represent seating for almost 1,500 women. The design plan had to be inventive in order to lend structural support for the building and these balconies.
This was absolutely state-of-the-art mid-19th century over a modern cast iron structure. The pillars are made of cast iron, and it is important to say that the first fully cast iron structure was built in London in 1851, and this building was built 3 years later. So in such a short period, Jews adopted state-of-the-art modern structure, modern technology. They wanted to state with that they are for modernization.
This use of modern technology also includes the design of the bima, from where the Torah is read.
The bima is traditionally a reading desk. Now here it is a mechanism which changes its shape. You push a button and it operates on itself. You know, traditionally Jews were waiting for the Messiah. And during 19th century, many Jews have mistaken modernity for the Messiah. So they saw in it a relief from all this suffering during the past, discrimination, persecution, modernity that due to technology will liberate all mankind.
But this notion of modernity is short-lived. From the start, the Nazis want to annihilate, along with the Jewish people, the synagogues of Europe. At the time, Hungary is one of Nazi Germany's allies. The Dohany is targeted and badly damaged by the pro-Nazi Hungarians. After, the Dohany serves as a broadcasting base for German radio, and later is transformed into a stable. As a result of the war, damage, and abandonment, the Dohany is no longer a religious building.
Architecture is never as sacred among the Jews as among the Christians. The very moment that the Jews, the believers, the worshippers are leaving the synagogue, it reverts to an unsacred condition. When the synagogue is abandoned, it's not sacred anymore. But the building is sacred until God's Spirit is there. And when people leave, it's gone.
Before the Second World War, about 200,000 Jews live in Budapest, making it the center of Jewish cultural life of Hungary. In 1944, Jews are rounded up and compelled to live in a ghetto around the Dohany Synagogue. During the Second World War, the Budapest Ghetto Jews cannot bury the dead outside the city as their religious tradition dictates. Instead, they are forced to use a burial ground next to the Dohany. Nearly 2,000 graves can be found here.
It was used as a makeshift cemetery during the siege of Budapest, when the Jewish cemeteries were under the Russians, the Soviet rule, and the city was still under the Nazis. So they couldn't go and bury the dead into the cemetery. So it was a makeshift cemetery, mass graves actually here, which is against the Jewish heritage. bodies shouldn't be near living people, near the synagogue. So it was really, it's something extraordinary that never happens in the Jewish tradition.
Just as the Jews are being herded into the Budapest Ghetto, mass deportations begin throughout the country. In less than 2 months, 440,000 Jews are deported.
Half of the Hungarian Jews perished. So everybody had an uncle. All my grandparents perished in the Holocaust. So we feel somehow uncomfortable. All this optimism that is shown here, it's an overstatement for us. It's a historic overstatement that we understand our great-grandfathers, but see that they were over-optimistic, and all this advance and emancipation was very relative, and then it was all broken during the Holocaust, and it was really a big matter in Jewish history, and Jews lost the faith. So everything what is post-Holocaust is different from what has been before.
The systematic extermination of Jews throughout Hungary destroys an entire community.
I always think of this magnitude of lost people.
Ivan Fischer is one of the founders of the Budapest Festival Orchestra. With his musicians, they perform in abandoned synagogues with the local population in attendance. These performances recall and honor the memory of the many once vibrant Jewish communities.
This small country lost approximately 500,000 people in the Holocaust. And there are many synagogues in small Hungarian towns and villages which are empty because there are no Jews in these places. Now, what happened to the buildings? One of them is a ruined building which is purposeless. One is used as a storage place. Another one is used by the community as an exhibition room or a small concert hall where various things are held. Nothing to do with the Jewish tradition.
Some of the Jews who survived the Shoah emigrate from Europe, but they remain attached to their Hungarian homeland. The Dohany is able to regain its splendor thanks to donations from all over the world. Since the end of the war, the Torahs of destroyed or abandoned Hungarian synagogues have found refuge inside the Dohany Ark. With these holy writings, this great synagogue once again becomes sacred to the Jews.
For the Jews, what really matters is life. You don't sacrifice yourself for buildings. It's interesting that in the Christian heritage you always have the Christian sacrifice. And you know the case of Isaac. God didn't allow Abraham to sacrifice Isaac. So there is no human sacrifice for any cause. So this makes architecture into a different context. It is not a sacrifice.
For over 150 years, the Dohany remains the symbol of emancipation for the Hungarian Jewish people. A survivor of the horror and chaos of history, it stands proudly, bearing witness of a community and their religion.